Welcome to the Elizabeth Cunningham Show, Courageously Expanding Love, with me, Elizabeth Cunningham. Has the way that love has arisen in you seemed out of place or even taboo? My mission is to expand the conversation of love in the world. Is it possible to have deep, loving, healthy relationships? Have you ever been curious about having more than one relationship or partner at a time? Get ready to transform in love, be courageous, and set yourself free. In this show, we talk about relationships, sex, love, and the ways we wish we could be, but never thought were possible. I shed light on things that are not always talked about with conversations about expanding love. The Elizabeth Cunningham Show starts now. Welcome to the Elizabeth Cunningham Show, Courageously Expanding in Love. And today we are talking about trans in love with Luckie Alexander. But before we get into that and introduce our phenomenal guest even more, a reminder that the Elizabeth Cunningham Show is live every Tuesday at 3 p.m. Pacific time on the Transformation Network Facebook page. And then it is aired on YouTube and podcast by Thursday every single week. All links are in the show notes, so you don't even have to remember that. You can just click on the link. Don't take it from me. All right, on today's episode, we will be talking with Luckie Alexander about trans in love. Luckie is the founder of Invisible Men, is a trans man who is an advocate exacting change that builds bridges within the LGBTQIA community and creates resources and support around transmasculine folks and trans parents. He is a member of several organizations, including the Los Angeles County Transgender Advisory Council, TAC, the CHIPTS UCLA CAB Member, HIV Commissioner, Here's to Life Global LGBTQ Ambassador, National COVID Impact Advisory Councilmember, Chair of WeHo Trans Advisory Board, and the artist of the All Black Lives Matter mural on Hollywood Blvd. Luckie, thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. Thanks you for having me. And I'm really excited about this conversation today.
Oh my God, I'm so excited. I've been excited about this conversation for months. We met, I feel like I've been excited about this conversation for like 9 months. We met each other like last October.
Yes,
I'm like, all right, this has, I think I messaged you like within like a week or two and I was like, hey, do you want to be on my show?
Absolutely, I'm here for it.
Oh my gosh, perfect. So in this show, like, I really like to start out, like, what are we actually talking about here? So the title of the show is Trans in Love. And we just introduced, who you are and what you stand for and all of the ways in which you're active and out there in the world. And first of all, thank you. Thank you for all of the work that you do. You are absolutely a pioneer in this space, and I honor you. I cherish you. Thank you so much for everything that you do. It's hugely important.
Yeah, absolutely appreciate that. But soon as I start to see my reflection within a lot of these spaces that I'm in, I'm going to be an old man and sit down and have a seat and let the new leaders lead.
Right, exactly. No, as much work as you've done, there is still a lot of work to do. And I am so happy that we are having this conversation today. So just to start off with the basics, what does it mean to be a trans man? Like if someone didn't know what that was, like, what is that?
Okay, so Transman assigned female at birth. So when I was born, doc said, "Hey, you got a girl," and that clearly was wrong. Um, and so we go through transition, and not everyone's transition looks the same. But for me, as a trans man, that means that I do sit in the binary, that I do identify as male. Um, However, like I said, I was born female at birth.
Hmm. And then what's the difference between being a trans man and being trans masculine?
Okay, so transmasculine is kind of like the umbrella term of the masculine spectrum with respect to our trans folks. So if you are non binary and you sit on the masculine side of the spectrum, then you could be considered trans masculine. But like trans in itself, like transgender, the term, as well as transmas, transfem, and non binary, all of those are self identifiers. So those are going to be how folks identify.
Yeah, so it's specific to the people who are whatever they feel is most appropriate for them and how they feel about who they are.
Right. So anybody that's transmasculine is trans that sits on the masculine side of the spectrum.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, beautiful. Thank you. I was like, that's very clear, very succinct. I love it. At least that's very clear to me. If anybody has any questions about that, definitely reach out.
Yeah.
So, what do we mean? Because we are also talking about trans men, trans masculine identifying people in love. And
Yes.
so, you also identify as polyamorous. So, what do you mean by polyamory?
For me, polyamory means that prior to being married, um, for me it was like a poly solo thing, and I was dating several folks, and everyone understood that I was polyamorous and that I was dating other people. So and when I was younger, I used to call it I was an honest player, right? And before I even knew there was a term for it, because I was one of those individuals that made sure that everyone that I was dealing with was in the know, right? I kept no secrets and made sure that folks understood kind of where I sat in that space. But now that I'm married, you know what I mean? Me and my wife date other people. Um, and what that looks like could be different from day to day because I am also pansexual. So sometimes some of the different characteristics that I'm looking for, whether physical or otherwise, that maybe my wife doesn't carry, I can go out and look for in other folks. And the same goes for her. Oh, I'm sorry, them.
Oh, got it. Okay, great. So
Yes.
your wife goes by they them pronouns.
Yeah, they, them, she, her.
They them she her. Okay, great.
So
Perfect.
my wife is also non-binary.
There you go. All right. Fantastic. Now we know. Well, if I am going to refer to them, then I will use they them pronouns. Thank you for letting us know.
No problem.
Yeah, no, it's so similar because when I first started practicing polyamory as well, I didn't know the word either. And so I was just like, exactly the same, where I was just like, okay, I'm just going to be as honest with everyone as I can possibly be.
Right.
Right. And you had a word for yourself. I was like, I just called myself a professional slut because I thought it was funny.
Hey, I'm here for that. No slut shaming here.
I thought, yeah, I was like, no, I'm a professional slut. I'm really good at this. I'm very professional about it. I let everyone know I have a lot of integrity.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You be real honest about what's going on here.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, hey, this is what you're signing up for. Like, it's not just me here. And also like being polyamorous and pansexual is that my joke is that no one is safe from my love.
Right. I'm here for it. I'm here for it. But you know what? One of the things that I did learn through kind of moving through and growing up through polyamory was communication was one of the most important pieces. Being able to communicate with partners and let them know, like, and checking in and finding out, like, how are you feeling about things? Like, is there anything that may be bothering you? Are there emotions and feelings that are coming up? Right.
Yeah.
And really looking at those things and being cognizant of how others feel.
Yeah, I think that polyamory is probably one of the most, if not the most, transformative things that I've ever participated. And I identify as polyamorous. Not everyone identifies as polyamorous. So I do use more of the terms of like practicing polyamory because not everyone has that as an identity.
Right.
But being polyamorous for me has been one of the most transformative things in my life, just because for that exact reason, because there's no hiding in polyamory.
Right.
Right. Like you have to deal with your stuff and you have
Right.
to talk about it too, to multiple people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But it makes you really want to do the work. It makes you, if this is something that you want to engage in, if this is something you want to practice, then it makes you want to do the work, right?
Yeah.
And if you don't, because it's going to crash and burn every time if you don't do the work, if you think that you can go through this without having to do the work, or that it's just an easy lift, right? Like you have to really be committed to doing the work.
Oh my God. I don't think a truer thing has ever been said. Yes. 100% yes. Okay, so and we're talking specifically about trans men and polyamory. So why for you is this so important to talk about?
Well, it's because one, trans men get left out of several conversations, and one of the more not even more important, but one of the more pressing issues that for me is HIV and trans men, right? Because we have our demographic who is so sexually diverse that 90% statistically, 90% of our transmasculine population identifies outside of being straight. So they're identifying as gay, pansexual, bisexual, or otherwise. But even within that 10% of our straight folks, half of those folks are engaging in sexual behaviors with trans women, which makes them no less straight, but also trans women being one of the more impacted populations when it comes to HIV. So we're sleeping with everybody, right? So if we're sleeping with all of the quote unquote risk factors, um, we need to be looked at as well. We need to, like what our sexual behaviors and what our risk for HIV also needs to be looked at, and it's not being really studied, so we don't know what the incidence or the prevalence of HIV is within the transmasculine community. But it also it's a double-edged sword, right? Because a lot of the data that is taken from lesbian folks is attributed to trans men and transmasculine folks. And I've had someone call me a lesbian 2.0, and I'm like, no, that does not even match. It doesn't, even though we're coming from similar places, some of us, but not all of us, come from the lesbian realm. But some of us are coming from different places, right? And our sexual identities and our sexual preferences are not the same at all.
Yeah, well, and I think that there's always a huge issue when you blanket statement, and you're just like, oh, well, this is close enough, which is
Right.
like in the realm of like science and medicine, it's like that just doesn't fly. Just like
Right.
you don't say who else do you say that about? Like, oh, that's close enough,
Right.
right? It's
But
just like,
see,
yeah.
and it sends a really dangerous message to our transmasculine folks that because there's no data around what HIV looks like for us, and because we're not being considered, it sends a very dangerous message that our folks don't need to use condoms, or they don't need to use protection, or they don't need to get tested, or they don't need to be on PrEP. All of these things are not messages that we want to send to this community. Our community needs to know that you need to get tested, you need to be using condoms, you need to consider PrEP. All of these different things are very important because we really don't know what the prevalence of HIV is within the transmasculine community.
Right. Well, and as you said, because it's not talked about, because I mean, just like, and just even, we're talking about something very nuanced where it's just like trans men or transmasculine identifying folks in the polyamorous community. And like, that's like super, super, super niche down. But just if you expand it out to trans men or transmasculine identifying people, that it is a very erased population.
Absolutely.
And like as you said, like there's people who don't even recognize that your identity is even real, which is wild.
Right. I had a whole emergency room doctor tell me I didn't exist. Right. I went in for I went in for a car accident, and none of the injuries were trans related. And they asked me the standard questions. Like what medications are you on? What surgeries have you had? And once I told the doctor I had had a hysterectomy, he said, "You don't know what a hysterectomy is. Where would you get a uterus?" And I was like, "I'm a trans guy." I transitioned a couple years ago, and he was like, "Well, no, trans men don't exist, only trans women." And I was like, "Wow, I must be a really, really fantastic figment of my own imagination," So it's things like that when you have people that are MDs like to tell you something like that, right? And then even more so when we look at things like Roe versus Wade, right? Roe versus Wade took rights away from birth givers, and we are birth givers as well as any other woman identified person. Like, we are birth givers, and so all of those things come into play. Access to abortions, access to Plan B, and all of those things are going to lead to even higher rates of suicide. And within the transmasculine community, our rates of suicide are the highest right now. Like, when we look at transmasculine folks, it also uncovers a lot of what happens with men in general and masculine identifying folks in general.
Yeah, and I want to get into that conversation, and we are going to go on a really quick break. But when we come back, I do want to dive even deeper into how does Roe v. Wade impact trans men, transmasculine folks, and also just the idea of, the gender that we've constructed of like, this is how men are, and then how that impacts even further trans men, transmasculine folks as well. All right, so we're going to go on a really quick break, and we will be right back. Welcome back to the Elizabeth Cunningham Show, courageously expanding in love. And I feel like I say this every single week, but this topic is so courageous, and it is about love and who we love and how we love, and all the different ways that shows up, and shedding light on things that we really don't talk about. And we really don't talk about trans men, transmasculine identifying folks, like just in general. And then talking about that in the context of love is like even more nuanced, right?
Yeah.
So Luckie, thank you so much for being here again. So before we left off, we were kind of starting to go into Roe v. Wade, which is, the big to do right now. And it's really terrifying for a lot of people. And also talking about this idea of like what a man is supposed to be and how that impacts trans men and masculine identifying people. So let's start with Roe v. Wade, because that's what we were starting to go into. So, share with us a little bit more about like how are trans men and transmasculine identifying people really impacted by this very abrupt decision?
Right. Well, one, I guess it wasn't so abrupt. We knew it was coming.
We knew it was coming, but it also was like
still shocking.
Shocking. That is the right, thank you. That is the right word. This shocking decision, even though, yes, we absolutely did know that it was coming, and it has been in the works for a while. But there's still like, at least for me, there's like that part of me that was like, no, like it won't happen. Right.
And I was holding out the hope too.
I was holding out hope.
Yeah. And so like this particular decision is hurtful for one. Like I have girls, I have young ladies that have given birth. And so knowing that my daughters won't have choice going forward is kind of scary, right? But even more so when we talk about our transmasculine folks, that choice has also been taken from us. So all of us, at birth giving capacity, no less than any of our femi or women identified folks that also give birth. This choice has been taken from us, but we also know like within that Roe v. Wade piece, because we're looking at they use the Privacy Act to do this, right? And so because they use the Privacy Act to do this, it also is going to impact LGBT rights across the board, but even more so when we look specifically at trans folks. This is going to this is healthcare. This is not having access to Plan B, not having access to abortions, not having access to fertility options and whatnot. And so for trans men and transmasculine folks, those that carry ovaries, now it takes away like our family planning aspirations. So when we want to create, our own people, we don't have that option anymore. And because our community deals with a lot of trigger warning, rape, or sexual assault, um, it's very scary to know that you may have to endure this trauma and then even more so endure another trauma carrying a child.
Right. And I mean, there's just so much nuance in this. And I think that that's also why it's really upsetting, because it is really private. It is about your body. It is about the individual and your right to choose what happens to your body. And that we have to talk about these nuances in such great detail, because it's like people need to know. Because
Right.
again, like having these blanket statements over like, oh, well, this is what abortion is,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or this is what, how you should be as a person who's able to birth a child,
Mm-hmm.
right? And taking that choice away, has us be in this position where it's like, yeah, we do have to talk about all of these nuances. And I know that even, uh, I guess I'll phrase it this way. So when I worked at the domestic violence center, one of the things that specifically the LGBTQ community faced is that police lawmakers didn't recognize that um, like same-sex couples or like anyone in the LGBTQ umbrella would experience partner violence
Right.
or would experience this type of assault, because somehow like being of different genders or being of the same genders in one relationship means that there's not violence, which is completely untrue, because people are
Rock
people
of
are
blah
people. Yeah.
blah.
And so really like looking at it from that point of view of like, again, being erased, like that your experience is being erased.
Right. And like with this Supreme Court decision, that's kind of where it's going. Because if it starts to do things like um, roll back same-sex marriage in some states, it is now currently illegal to have anal sex, anal penetrative sex, because the once one and all of these trigger laws are starting to really kick in, and it's like, golly, um, so much of our community is about to suffer behind this. So much of
Yeah.
our community, and it feels very targeted, because if we keep going like Trump, when Trump tried to do this when he was in office, it would have essentially erased trans people as a whole demographic. We would have completely been erased. They were talking about reversing name changes and cutting out healthcare. This is essentially going to take lives.
Yeah. And I know that even in places where these rights are protected, that it's still like before their decision about Roe v. Wade this past week, it was still even hard to get health care,
Right.
right? And this makes it like pretty much impossible. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot to handle. It's a lot to look at. I mean, luckily we're on the West Coast, and the West Coast is pretty safe for now, unless some other executive order comes down, that just kind of abolishes all this stuff. But um, it's scary as a
Yeah.
trans person, as a Black trans person. This is super scary.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit more, just personally, why it's so scary for you.
Um, One, like I'm in the business of protecting people that look like me, protecting people that walk my journey, Black or not, right? I'm in the business of supporting a community that is invisible. Um, this is going to make that job a whole lot harder. With the suicide rates of transmasculine folks being at the highest, um, I worry about losing my family. I worry about losing the people that I hold so near and dear. It's something that is is beyond scary because I'm talking about my family that's beyond my blood related family that all look and walk and talk like me, right? We all have similar experiences. We've all transitioned or something semblance of that. And just knowing that my community is actively being erased, like right before, and there's nothing that I can do about it. There's nothing that I can do about it but continue to speak, but continue to fight. And but at the personal level, at the individual level, like I'm not enough to stop what's happening.
Yeah, and I completely hear you, and I like feel that in my heart and like my bones, and it does feel at the individual level like there isn't something that you can do, and it really is the hope that what you are doing, that's what I tell myself.
Yeah.
It's just like the hope that the steps I am taking every day, that you're taking every day, that it does make a difference, and that, it can't just be you,
Right.
right? Like, it can't just be you. It
Right.
has,
It's a
yeah,
village. It
it's
takes
a
a village.
village. Yeah. So what, I know that I said that I wanted to talk about, how this identity of what we've made it mean to be a man, like in our society, like men are like this. And I do think I want to touch on that a little bit. And then maybe in the next segment, I do want to get into what can we do,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So I want to get into a little bit more of like the impact of like how we've created a society that does make it so much harder for people who identify as trans men, for people who identify as transmasculine. So tell me a little bit more about the construct that we have of men, like what it means to be a man, and how that does impact the trans community.
Okay. Well, we look at the male population, um, and we've been handed this narrative that they have to carry, right, around being stoic, um, being non-emotional, and we have to be strong, and we have to be all of these things, right? And so coming into our own manhood, of course, we're going to really look at what does it look like societal wise to be men. And so carrying a lot of those ideals or those like constructs of what it looks like to be a man is toxic in itself. Like masculinity is not inherently violent in itself, like masculinity in itself, right? But when we look at the way that people move and navigate around masculinity and what that looks like, we're expected to perform masculinity in a very specific kind of way. And when we don't perform our masculinity, or we don't perform in the ways that society deems normal for us to move and navigate, now we're outed, or we're othered, right? Because my masculinity doesn't look like everyone else's masculinity. It doesn't look like what your typical. Now, if you were to see me walking down the street, you would never think that I was trans. You would never think that I navigated my masculinity differently, right? You might even think I'm a little gay, and that's okay too. I don't care. Um, but my masculinity is something that I named for myself, as do so many transmasculine folks. And because of that, a lot of times um, folks feel like they're not man enough, or they're not enough of what men are supposed to be. And so they start to really internalize those things. They start to really internalize what that looks like. But on the other side of that, we've seen to uncover a lot of what men, our general population of males, looks like, right? Not able to have those spaces to express emotion, or safe spaces to express emotion, or express a variety of emotions. Like, a lot of our male counterparts are looking at things like anger and happy, like they only get two. You're either happy or you're not, right? And those are the emotions that they're expected to perform or expected to express. But when we look at transmasculine individuals, we have a different access to our emotions, right? Like, I transitioned when I was 30, so imagine having that space to express emotion, to express like I'm not okay, and it be okay for me to express that for 30 years, and then once my face looks like this, and I look more masculine, and I'm presenting a lot more masculine, that space disappears. So now we're stuck bottling that up or internalizing all of those things, and people eventually say, I don't want to do this, because there's no support, because there's no release, there's no outlet to be able to say I'm not okay in a space, and it be okay to those around them, right? And so clearly, if transmasculine folks are going through this, even more so, our male population, that is our cis male population, is going through that on a deeper level, because they've been socialized to think that. They've been socialized to behave this way, right? And so, yeah, I would be a very angry individual too if I could not express the things that were going on in my head, or the emotions that were going on within me. And if everyone's expecting me to be one way or another, and there's no gray area in order for me to outlet those things, I would be a very, very upset and violent individual too, right? So I get it. And I think that our masculine demographic as a whole, trans or not, needs to be supported in those ways, needs to have that emotional support in order for them to outlet those things.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you do have a very unique perspective, as you know, as you said, being someone who was uh, born assigned female at birth, like being able to express those emotions, and then you see that break,
Mm-hmm.
right? You see the absolute difference in that, and then the empathy that you have for people who are cisgendered men, who have had, you know, living under that narrative their entire life and are expected to be that way. And this might be too much of a tangential question, but what that brings up for me is like, what does this even mean to like live in a binary, you know, gender binary world, right? Is it something that we should completely just throw out the window? Or is it something that we should understand is so much more than a binary, and that it is more of like a spectrum?
Well, you know, historically, we have spent more time celebrating several genders than we have celebrating these two, or really focusing in on two genders. So, so
Like,
historically,
for those who are listening to the podcast, I'm freaking out on video right now because I'm just like, yes, exactly, yes,
right.
yes, exactly,
So, and
yeah.
in several different cultures, in several different ways, different genders have been celebrated. That all of these, there have been up to 300 genders within, you know, the life of the world, that have been celebrated, that have been uplifted, and trans people in several different cultures have been uplifted and highlighted as the spiritual shamans, or the light workers, or all of these folks that bring folks into spirituality, or bring folks into these realms of enlightenment, right? And so in several cultures, trans folks are the ones that are blessing babies, right? And so it wasn't until colonizers came into play when we started to look at two genders, because it was a means of control. It was a means of being able to control the masses, and consolidate things, and gain superiority,
Yeah.
like, it's really a construct of the patriarchy.
Whew, yep. All right, we are gonna go to break. With that, I'm just like, yep, amen. Yep, exactly what he said. And so we're gonna go on a break really quick. And when we come back, I want to talk about what can we do? Like, what are the actions that we can take? And I think that learning is so important, but we talked about that helplessness earlier. And I really want to address, okay, like, what can we do? Let's talk about that. So when we get back from break, that's what we're going to talk about. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back to the Elizabeth Cunningham Show, courageously expanding in love. Literally every time that I say my tagline inside of my show, when we're talking about these topics, it is so true. It is like, and Lucky, we haven't even gone to like your personal story, and we're not going to get into your personal story, you know, on this episode. But for anybody who wants to learn more about Lucky and how amazing he is and everything that he's gone through and all the things that he's done for the trans community, like, please look up his organization, Invisible Men. And we are going to talk about what can you do. So on that, on something that you can do is just like look up who Lucky is and see what he's doing and how you can get involved with his organization. But also, like, with Roe v. Wade, with what, you know, the absolute need for support in the trans community, what can people do?
They can, well, for starters, let's start to really pierce policy, right? And we want to call your Congress people, call your assembly people, call your state's leaderships, call your lawmakers, and tell them that this is not what you want. Tell them that this is not what we're doing. That's gonna be a first step. But for support within the trans community, if your folks have people in their life or in their circles, or they know of trans folks, ask them how they're doing. You know, make sure that you're supporting those folks in your spaces. Find out what their story is, find out what are their challenges, and figure out where you can help plug in. But definitely communicate with the trans community, really inquire. And I don't mean like what's in your pants, or, you know, inquiring about like all of the nonsense. Like, really inquire on what the challenges of that particular community can be met, right?
Yeah.
And so if it's around mutual aid, or if it's around housing or employment, understanding the relationship to trans folks and a lot of these services that we don't have, especially transmasculine individuals. And on a personal note, like, if you have a trans person in your life, if you have a transmasculine individual in your life, all I'm asking is that you give them a hug today. You know, because that kind of one-on-one support, like showing love, because love shows up in so many different ways, and love is one of the most beautiful emotions a person can have, right? Because that can be given to anyone. So that little bit of love, believe me, can go a long way for folks. So just call them up and let them know you love them. Give them a hug. Just really show up, but really finding out and listening to the community that you're trying to serve is what the essence of an ally or an accomplice is, right? Is really showing up in that space, asking them what they need. Let's listen to these communities, right? And if you have a transmasculine individual that's in your space, you know, just ask them how they're doing. A lot of folks just need the opening. How are you doing? Well, I'm gonna tell you how I'm doing. You know, yeah. No one
I'm
has
gonna tell you
asked
all
me
about
that.
it.
Right, you know,
Yeah.
and be truthful, be very very sincere about it. Don't say, hey, how you doing, and then they're like, you know, yeah, and then they start talking to you, walk away. Like, be sincere about it. Like, be really intentional about asking those questions, be really intentional about supporting these communities. But on the larger level, definitely communicate with your state's lawmakers, your local lawmakers, you know, get involved. and that's one of the things that we can do. Like all of the different positions and seats that I hold within LA County and LA City and several other positions that I sit in are because I don't see myself reflected, right, in these positions that are making decisions about the lives and about my life and lives of others that walk my journey, right? So get involved. You can't excuse my language, you can't bitch about it if you don't do anything, right? If you're not voting, if you're not talking to your policymakers, if you're not getting involved, you can't be mad when the decision is not in your favor.
I absolutely, completely agree with you on that. And that is any person who knows me personally knows the phrase that I say, which is, "Are you complaining about it? Are you doing something about it?"
Absolutely.
Uh,
And there's a
and
there's
yeah,
a distinct difference.
there's a difference. There's a difference, and there is time for complaining sessions with
Hmm.
your friends, venting sessions. Like, it is absolutely therapeutic. I'm not saying shove everything down and just
Right.
go do something about it. Like, absolutely take care of your mental and emotional well-being, let your feelings be known, and also take action about it.
Right.
It's not going to get better if you just complain about
Right.
it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And also, just pointing out too, because one of the things and when I'm having conversations with people about what can I do, is that people see people like you, Lucky, and they're like, well, I can't, be that. Like, I can't, or I don't want to. Like, I don't want to be in the positions of leadership that you put yourself in.
Right.
Um, and you don't, that's not the only thing. That
Right.
is not the only way to take
We
action.
need everybody. Everybody
Right.
is needed in the movement. Everyone has a place, right? So one of my mentors and one of my chosen family told me one time, because I said, I'm not an advocate. I'm not an activist. This was early on, um, and they told me we need everybody. Everybody's skills are necessary. So whether you know how to make a flyer, or you know how to um, you know, do crowd control, or you know how to be an observer, or whatever that looks like. I know how to protest. Okay, great. We need you to go protest, right? I know how to make flyers. You go make flyers, right? Everybody's skill is needed. So, regardless of what your action may be, it may not be being an advocate. It may not be being in leadership in a way that you're forward facing. It may means that you're the one that's posting on social media to put the word out for all of the folks that are doing the other parts, right? So all and everyone is needed.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And especially if you're someone who, like, I have a really amazing human in my life, and they always point to time, treasure, and talent. Like, looking in those three categories, what kind of time can you put in? Like, can you just be a person who shows up?
Right.
Because sometimes that's that is needed. Is like, we just need more bodies here, right? Like, there's a protest happening and we just need people to show up, right?
Absolutely.
And then, time, treasure, like, can you put money? Are you in a position where you can put money into organizations that are doing something about this, right?
Right.
And then talent, what are you like? And that's what you were just bringing up. Like, what's a skill that you have
Right.
that is useful? And I absolutely believe that everybody has a place. Everybody has a place. Everybody has a skill that's useful. I remember when the BLM protests were happening in Seattle, I had multiple people who were doing all sorts of different things, whether that be organizing, whether that be EMT, whether that be like just calling, just like, if you're someone who's like, I know that I can talk to anybody, we need people who can talk to anybody.
Right. 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 And for our trans community, your existence in itself
Mm-hmm.
Okay, for our LGBT community, for your existence, just you standing in your authenticity is an act of resistance. It is an act of advocacy, right? So just standing up and being authentic to you and walking through the world every day is in itself an act of revolution.
Yeah, it really is. And I really, for anybody who is listening to this, your voice matters. Like if someone if no one has ever told you this before, like I feel really fortunate that I've had people in my life that have told me how much I matter and told me how much my voice matters. And I know that that is an absolute privilege that I've had, and not everybody has that. So for anybody who has never been told this, I am absolutely talking to you. You matter. Your voice matters. Who you are matters. The person that you are matters.
Absolutely.
Okay. And it really is just, for me, one of the things that keeps me going is just knowing that.
Absolutely. And I think that anyone coming up in this age and in this world, like, just remember that you're the only one that can be you. So do the best at being you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And stand in your truth, stand in your power. And there is support out there. We're here.
What's what are some questions? I know you mentioned earlier, like, if you have a trans person in your life, ask them how you are, ask them questions, get interested in them. What are some questions? And maybe you want to answer this as either the person you are now, or maybe the person that were, at 30 transitioning. But what are some questions that if someone would have asked you, or someone asked you now, that would make a huge difference for you?
Um, how are you doing is the simplest question. Just inquiring whether a person is okay is a good start, right? Because I was masculine prior to transition and even more masculine now. There's not very many times that people ask me how are you doing, and in a sincere kind of way, right, that are outside of my community. Now, community, we ask each other all the time, we do check-ins regularly, but no one outside of that, outside of community, is like sincerely like, how are you doing, right? And because we don't ask men in general, like trans or not, like, how are you doing, um, I think it's not something that people find necessary to ask.
Mm.
Just sincerely inquire, because if I'm in a space that I trust you, and I think this may be true for other folks, but if I'm in a space and I trust you and you honestly ask me how I'm doing, I'm going to give you that. And then that's going to lead way to kind of open up in the ways that you can support that individual, right? Like, how can I support you? Where do you need me to stand? Where do you need me to be? But if you ask, how can I support you, before you ask a person how they're doing, they may not know what
Right.
kind of support that they need. They may not know what are the ways in which that you can support, right?
Right.
So if you ask them how they're doing and they're like, I'm not okay. Okay, how can I support you not being okay? Where can I be in a space that will facilitate you kind of outletting that,
Yeah.
right? So I think just starting simple, asking a person, how are you? How are you doing? Are you okay? Are you
Mhm.
hungry? Right?
Yeah.
Like, understanding like basic things that a lot of cis het people take for granted are
Mm.
things that we have to worry about on a daily basis,
Right.
right? Like, have you eaten today? Are you okay? Are you sleeping in a bed? Are you in a home? Right? Like, all of these simple things that a lot of our counterparts take for granted, like, we struggle to attain and keep, right? And simple things like knowing where my next meal is coming from, or knowing where I'm going to sleep that night, right?
Mm.
Trans folks don't have that same luxury at all times. And you know, there are a lot of us that do have the things that we need, and we're employed in all of those things, right? But also I understand where my privilege is, because I'm perceived as cishet, right? So my privilege looks different when it comes to having a house or having a job or having this or that, right? So for all of our trans folks that don't have that privilege to be able to just stand in that, um, ask them how they're doing.
Yeah, thank you. All right, we are going to take another break, and when we come back, we're going to begin to come to a close to our episode. We'll ask our end of episode questions, which I'm always excited about. And then we'll send everybody off with how they can get a hold of you and how and what you're up to. So, all right, we will be right back. Welcome back to the Elizabeth Cunningham Show, Courageously Expanding in Love, where we've been having an amazing, in-depth, at times, and we just said this on break, at times really heavy, but necessarily heavy, like realistically, like heavy conversation about being trans and being in love. And we talked about polyamory, and then we kind of went into Roe v. Wade. I'm like just seeing that in like hindsight. But this is what people are dealing with now. And this also heavily impacts your ability to not just navigate relationships, but navigate the world. Right. And so thank you so much for coming on, for having this conversation again. We've talked a lot, and so in this last section, we are going to go straight into our closing questions. Okay. So, first question: what does love mean to you?
Love means so many things. Oh my goodness, love means, you know, like, it means my kids. It means my community. It means my wife. You know, it means that I found people in my space that know how much of a nut job I am and still ride with it. That's what love means to me. You know, my crew, my teams, my wife, my kids, just my village. You know, they know I'm a complete nut job, and they're like, "Look, we're gonna still ride with you, and we're gonna hold you, and we're gonna carry you through your nut jobbiness."
I love that. Love means that to you. Absolutely. All right. If people got nothing else out of this episode, what do you hope that they got?
I hope that they got that change doesn't happen without people being uncomfortable. I hope they got that our community needs your support. And I also hope that they got the humanity in our community, through me being able to kind of tell some of those stories. I hope they got that we're people and we just need support like other people do.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you. I also hope that people got that too.
And I also think, I hope that they got that we love too, and we love hard. You know, I can speak for me. I love hard, and it looks different depending on who it's aimed at. But no one is safe, like you say.
No one is safe from my love. My maniacal plan to love everyone.
I'm here for world domination through love.
Yes, yes. That is in my emails. I don't know if you remember that first email that I sent you.
I do. World domination through love.
World domination through love. If you're going to be on the show, you got to be on board.
I'm with it.
All right. What's an action that we talked a lot about action, but what is an action that people can take?
Y'all can donate to Invisible Men and make sure
Hey!
we can keep doing what we do. Y'all can go to our online store, buy some merch. Again, supporting the work that we do. We There's not very many resources for us, and so we created our own. So if we could get folks to support us and support other trans-led organizations throughout wherever you're listening from, like definitely support trans-led organizations, including Invisible Man.
Oh, beautiful. Awesome. And that leads directly into the next question, which is, yeah, what are you promoting and how can people find you?
Okay, so you can find us at Invisible T Men, and it's invisible with the letter T, MEN, .org. You can find us at the website. You can also see us on Invisible Transman on IG. We're Invisible Men on Facebook. You can find me at Luckie Alexander on IG, and the same on Facebook. Uh, we are doing a lot of initiatives right now around healing and support. So definitely check us out. Refer your folks if you have transmasculine folks in your space that need support. Hit us up. We're a national organization. We're soon to go international, but yeah, we're
Wow.
all over the place. So definitely, if you need support or you know someone that needs support, definitely don't hesitate to send us an email or check us out on social media.
Beautiful. And all of those links are in the show notes. So all you have to do is just scroll down. You will see all of those links. So you can go ahead right now, click on the link. I don't care if you don't listen to the last bit of the show, if you're going to support Invisible Men. All right. Um, Anything else that you want to say or share before we close?
I would like to say if you're an individual that watched this or listened to it all the way through and you've gotten to this point, I appreciate you for just taking the time to listen to what I had to say. Also, if you are a transmasculine individual out there that is struggling and needs some support, don't hesitate to hit us up. Um, if you don't have anybody in your space to tell you I love you, I do. I love you, and we're here to support you if you need us.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lucky. I cannot tell you how grateful I am that you exist.
Oh, thank you.
I am so grateful that you exist, that you are the person that you are, that you do the work that you do. It is not easy. It's not easy being you. It's not easy doing the work that you do. It's not, we've shared more intimate stories, together, not on this show. And the the things that you've been through to be here for the community that you serve is nothing short of miraculous.
I appreciate that, and
Yeah.
I appreciate you for giving me the platform to talk about these things.
Yeah. My absolutely my pleasure.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Beautiful. All right. And spoiler alert, we're gonna have Lucky back on in
Absolutely, I'm coming back.
yes, in November, and we'll put together another amazing episode for y'all. So um, again, Lucky, thank you so much for being on the show. It has been my honor to have you, and everyone who's listening and watching, thank you so much. Remember to like, subscribe, turn on notifications. I don't know what platform that you're consuming this on. So whatever it is on that platform that that you hit a button and then it makes sure that you listen, do that. If you have a platform, if you're listening on a platform where you can leave a review, please tell us, how we're doing, and give us any feedback that you would like. We are live. The Elizabeth Cunningham Show is live every Tuesday, 3 p.m. Pacific time on the Transformation Network Facebook page, and is then aired on YouTube and podcast every Thursday, every single week. All those links are also in the show notes. So until next time, keep loving. You have been listening to The Elizabeth Cunningham Show, Courageously Expanding Love with me, Elizabeth Cunningham. Tune in live every Tuesday at 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on transformationtalkradio.com, where we shed light on relationships, sex, love, and the ways we wish we could be, but never thought were possible. Learn to love yourself and create the relationships you want. Connect with me at elizabethannCunningham.com. That's elizabethannCunningham.com.